again, Brian Pallister claims to be a conservative premier, someone who, you would think would be on the spectrum of caring about civil liberties. And yet they issued more than $180,000 in tickets in 1 week to people accused of breaking their coronavirus regulations. There were 100 tickets issued, and nearly half were for not following various public health orders. According to the CBC, and take that for what you will, but I mean, they're reporting the raw numbers here. In total, 20% of the tickets were related to gatherings of larger than 5 people. So this could be a family get-together, and yet that's basically been outlawed in Brian Pallister's Manitoba. How do we fight this? How do we? I guess the idea is to take on as many cases as we can and just overwhelm them with our ability to fight back, and maybe they'll just stop charging people and ticketing them?
Well, I think, again, Sheila, it comes back to the issue of fear, is that lots of people, citizens, are so fearful that when they either hear of these tickets being issued or even receiving them themselves, they kind of just say, they capitulate and say, well, I guess, it's something that's necessary because we have such an important health situation. But I think we just need to look at these tickets one at a time, whether they come to us through Fight the Fines or anyone who's representing themselves or who has other lawyers. They need to be looked at and see if there's any real connection between, first of all, health concerns and the laws that are in place. And if not, there can be an attack on that in terms of the constitutionality of it. And then we need to look to see if people are actually breaking the law. We see bylaw enforcement officers. I have one case here in Ottawa, where a bylaw officer assaulted my client as he was leaving a park following an instruction to leave a park very early in the pandemic. And he was assaulted by the bylaw officer. The bylaw officer has since lost his job, but the charges remain, and we're fighting that. So each one of these charges, if they're fought and if they're challenged and if people don't just simply capitulate, I think we'll see a bit of a different shift in focus from both the government and the prosecution branch of the government as to what extent this needs to be pursued.
Now, one last question. In some instances, I think a lot of these gatherings of larger than 5 people, particularly in Manitoba, end up being church services, Christian church services. And I think there's some legal question around the ability of police and bylaw enforcement officers to disrupt a church service that's taking place. And we've seen some video footage of that, particularly with a Mennonite church near Steinbach. How do we fight that? How do we help that?
Well, at this point, Sheila, I'm not able to say that I've seen a considerable amount of evidence that churches are being targeted or that freedom of religion is being targeted, but they do make an easy target, so to speak, for bylaw enforcement officers, is that where these laws, and we're seeing this across the country, have basically resulted in normal society as we're used to, walking to the store, being able to leave your house, being able to see the faces of the people in your community. Normal life has been changed. And for many people, worship is a very important part of normal life. And so where people want to keep experiencing normal life, that's where we're seeing the friction between some of these overreaching government policies.
Well, David, I'm so glad that you are working on these Fight the Fines cases with us. I know that you and I have been working on one in particular that I hope everybody at home stays tuned, because that'll be coming out shortly. If anybody would like to support the work that David is doing to help people fight these fines, they can go to FightTheFines.com and donate today, and see some of our prior cases and, of course, some of our successes that are already starting to trickle in. David, thanks for joining me. We'll talk very, very soon.
Thank you, Sheila.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.